Hey friends! In this tutorial I've decided to help all of the beginners that are looking to understand how to paint watercolor flower compositions. We are going to start super easy with very small compositions. In particular, we are going to create 4 different ones, and I'm going to explain you where to add the flowers, the leaves, the main flowers and the secondary flowers. With this exercise, you will understand how to create something small, and then eventually you can build up from there to create compositions that are fuller with flowers and leaves. My name is Luisa and this is the Lulu Blue Studio. Let's start painting these 4 flower compositions together. With this tutorial, I aim to support all of the watercolor beginners out there. I want to encourage you to keep painting flowers even if in this moment of your journey these don't look perfect. And I want to help you thinking a bit differently. Instead of painting large-scale flower compositions like many tutorials out there are suggesting you to do, I encourage you to try painting small flower compositions. If you practice your brush strokes and you think about painting smaller size flowers, you will understand better how to create the shape of your petals, how to place the secondary colors, where to place the secondary flowers compared to the primary flowers, and also where to add the leaves. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you 4 different mini compositions that you can paint together with me, and we are going to analyze where we are going to add the main flowers, the secondary flowers, and also the leaves. So let's dive into the first mini composition. For this mini composition, I'm using a round brush in size 6 because I think a round brush is a brush that basically all of the beginners will own in first place. And after having painted the first flower that is facing the observer in purple color, I painted a smaller flower on the left side and then an additional flower in orange color in the upper left corner of this composition. So basically, I am trying to place these 3 flower elements in a sort of a triangular shape. Then, with some orange color, I'm creating another additional flower that is located on top of all of them. So when you are creating mini compositions like these ones, you can really focus on deciding where to add each and every element of your composition. In this first example, we are painting all of the flowers in a sort of circular shape. And when it's time to create the leaves, we are going to add them in green color exactly in the areas where these floral elements are touching each other. When you are adding your leaves, you need to think where you want this flower composition, this mini flower composition, to be flowing towards to. And therefore, in this case, I am trying to add the flow to this whole composition through these green elements, through these leaves. We are going to keep everything super simple in this tutorial, so we are not really going to focus on the shape of the leaves and the type of colors that we are using, but we are going to mainly focus our attention in understanding how to create these flowers, where to place the flowers that are the main elements of any composition, and also where to add the leaves. Leaves, in general, are for me elements that frame the flowers that I'm creating, and so in this case they are located all around the flowers. Then we start to paint the second mini composition, and in this case I'm going to create the main flower in pink color. I'm still using this small round brush in size 6 because it's quite easy to handle for small flowers. And after having created the first layer in pink color, this is Quinacridone Magenta, I started to add a little bit of brush strokes in Quinacridone Purple. So take advantage of these mini compositions to try to even understand how wet on wet works, how much pigment you need to add to your first layer of wet paint, and then proceed adding smaller size flowers all around the main one. When these are created in a similar way as I have done in this second mini composition, I start to add another main flower next to the first one I've created. I still use this round brush in size 6, and the shape of this second flower is still very simple. Every time you're creating flowers, remember to have all of the petals leading to the same center. So it doesn't matter which type of flower this is, the petals need to lead to the same center. In this second mini flower composition, we are going to also add stems to our flowers. And so that's what I started doing with some green paint. When you are adding the leaves, remember to have them in places that lead the eyes of the observer at looking at your mini composition. And therefore, in this case, I'm adding some small leaves up where the secondary flowers are. And these leaves are pretty small in size because the secondary flowers are small themselves. And I've added also bigger leaves where the bigger flowers are located. So my suggestion for you when you're creating these mini compositions is really to place all of your elements all around and think about the weight of all of the elements you're creating. How big are these flowers? How big are these petals? And therefore, how big do I want these leaves to be? Think about all of these ideas and try to experiment creating small flower compositions that are going to be your base to understand then how to create bigger flower compositions in a second moment. For the third flower composition, I started using some warm colors, some orange and scarlet red. The shape of this first flower is still very simple, but here I'm still practicing at creating petals with white spaces, because it's important to leave in watercolor some white spaces, and also that the direction of all of these petals is leading to the same center. Then I've added a rose flower underneath, and being this a small composition allows me to understand better where to create the center of this rose and how to create these circular shapes, leaving some white spaces in the roses too. Then, since I wanted to create a flower composition that is a little bit more complicated, let's say, I'm adding some additional secondary flowers in yellow color. And where do I add these secondary flowers? Where I know that I want this composition to be highlighted for the flow. And so I've added these yellow elements more towards the outer part of this composition. And then now in this moment I'm adding brown elements that connect these yellow flowers to the main center of the composition. With the same round brush in size 6, I'm also adding these leaves. And since this is a small flower composition, these leaves don't need to be too big in size. So you can practice the simplest brush strokes to create these round shape leaves. Starting with small shapes is the easiest way to understand what is the shape of flowers, what is the overall flow of the flower, and let's say it's more of a study of something that you can create in bigger size in the moment you feel more confident. When you have small type of compositions like this one, you can also practice all of the techniques that you would have anyway if you would paint a bigger flower composition. When you are creating flower compositions in any size, so even for these small size pieces, remember to look at your composition as a whole to understand where to add all the different elements like flowers and leaves and additional ideas that you might have. For the fourth mini composition, I've decided to create some roses. And creating small roses is the best way to practice this type of brush strokes where you add some pressure to create these circular lines. To create the rose, I usually like to start from the center, and then based on the direction of the rose, I'm gonna add more brush strokes onto the left side if I want the rose to be looking towards the right side, or more towards the right side if I want the rose to look towards the left side. And so this is what I'm practicing here. Then, when the two roses have been created, I start to think about the leaves. And in this small composition, I can start to practice, for example, even different types of shape of leaves. Doesn't matter if these are exactly the shapes of your roses. With small exercises like this one, you can invent even types of leaves and shapes, for example, of leaves or flowers that you can add to your bigger flower compositions. In this small composition, I've decided to add these green elements where the two roses are connecting. And therefore, these green elements that are quite long are sort of introducing the red flowers that are in the middle. So when you are creating small flower compositions like these ones, think whether you want your composition to be in a round shape or, for example, a C shape, or where do you want, for example, elements to introduce your flowers. Like in this case, I have a higher element that are the leaves and lower elements that are the leaves in this rose composition. When the base of all of these 4 flower composition is complete, I can start to add more details through the wet on dry technique. I personally like to add these brush strokes with a fine brush, and I usually use the Silver Black Velvet brush in size 6. Having small compositions like this one really allows me to understand where to add these brush strokes, and also I can practice on the pressure I want to add on the small petals to create different type of lines, whether I want them thicker or thinner. In this moment, I am just adding a few brush strokes in similar colors as I've used for the base of the flowers, mainly to the petals and where I want to highlight the shape of these petals. Based on the style that you want to develop, or based also on the type of composition you want to create, it's up to you whether you want to add these brush strokes with the wet on dry technique. I really think that these type of brush strokes can really highlight particular types of flowers, and they can really allow them to pop. So creating small flower compositions in this style will allow you to practice also with the wet on dry technique in a better way than you would do if the compositions are bigger, because you might lose track of where to add these brush strokes, or they would become a little bit too heavy if you don't know exactly where to add them. And so I proceed in the same way for all of the mini flower composition I am creating. In this case, for example, I'm trying to add these brush strokes onto the petals, but not following exactly the shape of the petals, but let's say leaving some white spaces between these additional brush strokes and the base of the flowers I've created. So when you have a small flower composition like these ones, and even you create more than one on your paper, you can really test different techniques and even look at them side by side to understand what you have created and what you like more, where your style is leading you towards to. I think this is a fun exercise to practice because if one small flower composition doesn't come out as well as you expected, you can always create just another one next to it because you're not using all of the paper that you have in front of you. And so I really hope that with this tutorial I'm giving you some inspiration of small, let's say mini, flower compositions you can create on your own, and you can therefore test different ideas on how to arrange flowers, which type of colors you want to add, and how to add layers through the wet on dry technique. Also, with this type of studies, you can also understand better where to add some elements compared to others and how to give a flow to your flower compositions. In fact, it's much simpler to understand how to give a flow to a flower compositions when all of the elements are small. Remember, in any case, to create elements in different sizes, beside different shapes. So, for example, as I'm doing in this mini flower composition with roses, some leaves are in bigger size, and these are the more elongated leaves, but I've created also some smaller and darker leaves in green color that are hugging and framing the red roses. You can then apply all of the learnings of what you have tested and experimented on your small flower compositions in your bigger paintings. And when you're going to approach a white, bigger sheet, you're gonna have anyway more confidence on how to paint your main flower, your hero flower, and your secondary flowers, and where to add leaves and other elements. Also, as a final tip, placing together on one piece of paper the 4 mini compositions will allow you to see, for example, 4 different options of colors that you could blend together and decide which one fits better your style for the final composition that you want to achieve. Painting small compositions, it's such an underrated, great way to study compositions of any type, and I really encourage you to try this technique not only for flower compositions but also for any other subject you like painting. Let me know in the comments below if you are already using this technique of painting in small size a subject of your preference before approaching bigger compositions. And if this is a new idea for you, let me know in the comments if you find it useful and if you are going to test this practice. Thank you so much for watching this video. See you with the next tutorial.